Millionaire sees a struggling single mother begging for food. What he discovers leaves him shocked. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. If you believe in second chances and the quiet strength of everyday heroes, this one is for you. Now sit back and get ready because this story will stay with you. The rain fell in gentle sheets that morning, washing the cobblestone streets of Harbor Point in a soft gray mist. The town nestled between the cliffs, and the sea stirred with sleepy charm. Flower boxes clung to windows, fishmongers called from beneath striped awnings, and the scent of brine and baked bread mingled in the crisp air. Most people hurried past with umbrellas tilted against the wind, but Elias Monroe walked slowly, his hands shoved into the pockets of his wool coat. Head-bowed thoughts, 1,000 miles away. He had not always moved like a ghost through the world. Once Elias had commanded kitchens across the globe, his name whispered with reverence by critics and chefs alike. The youngest chef in the country to earn 3 Michelin stars. The host of a wildly successful culinary travel show. A face that graced magazine covers and inspired books, but fame like butter left on the stove too long burned fast. A betrayal by his closest business partner had triggered a catastrophic collapse. Lawsuits, public humiliation, the closure of his beloved restaurants one by one. After that, Elias disappeared. Not into alcohol or scandal like the tabloids predicted, but into silence. Into Harbor Point, a place where no one recognized him, and if they did, they kept it to themselves. He rented a modest house near the harbor and spent his days walking, thinking, and avoiding people. Cooking, once his great love, had become painful. Every time he picked up a knife or smelled rosemary, memories came flooding back of a firelit kitchen in Florence, of laughter and clinking glasses of trust that had cost him everything. It was during one of these aimless morning walks that Elias saw her. She was crouched beside the doorway of Bellamy's Market, a small family-run grocer on the corner of Main and Willow. Her coat was soaked through, clinging to her like a second skin. One arm was wrapped protectively around a child, maybe 7 or 8, while the other gripped a folded sign made from a flattened cardboard box. It read simply, "Hungry. Anything helps." Most people walked by with practiced indifference, their eyes sliding past as if she were invisible. Elias slowed. Something about the stillness of her posture, the way she curled herself around the child like a human shield, stopped him. The little girl pressed her face into her mother's side. Dark curls plastered to her forehead, cheeks flushed with cold. She wore mismatched shoes and held a ragged stuffed bear in one small hand. Elias hesitated under the overhang of a flower shop. He had seen homeless people before. He had donated money served in kitchens that provided meals to the unhoused. But this was different. This was not a statistic. This was a woman and a child in the rain in front of a grocery store filled with warmth and plenty. The woman looked up. Their eyes met. She did not flinch or lower her gaze. Instead, she squared her shoulders and drew the child closer. A flicker of pride passed across her face like a flame refusing to be extinguished. Elias walked toward them. "Can I help you?" he asked quietly. She rose slowly, careful not to jostle the child who clung to her. Her voice was calm, but laced with exhaustion. "We're fine," she said. "You're clearly not fine. We don't take handouts." "I didn't offer a handout," Elias replied. "I asked if I could help." She studied him. A drop of rain clung to her eyelashes. Her lips parted, then closed. She was younger than he had first thought, maybe early 30s, though her expression carried years beyond that. "My name's Nora," she said at last. "This is Camilla." The girl peeked out from behind her mother's coat. Her eyes were striking wide, luminous, the color of storm-washed glass. She did not speak, but she did not look away either. "Elias," he said, "are you hungry?" The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Camilla's stomach growled audibly. Nora's jaw clenched. "Yes," she whispered, "but we don't want pity. We just need time. A chance." "There's a diner around the corner," Elias said. "Come with me." Inside the diner, the air was warm and thick with the smell of pancakes and coffee. A waitress blinked in surprise as Elias entered with the soaking pair in tow. He guided them to a booth in the back, away from curious glances. Camilla sat rigid at first, her eyes darting around the room. Elias noticed how she watched everything: the people, the plates, the servers, like someone taking mental notes for survival. He ordered for them. Nora tried to protest, but he ignored her. "Let her eat," he said gently. "You can fight me afterward." When the food came, Camilla's eyes widened. She looked to her mother before reaching for the fork. Nora nodded once, and the child began to eat with quiet intensity, manners so impeccable they bordered on eerie. Nora barely touched her plate. "You're not eating," Elias said. She shrugged. "Habit. I wait." "Wait for what?" "For the world to fall apart again." Elias said nothing, just sipped his coffee. After a long pause, he asked, "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" Nora's shoulders tensed. "We're between places." "That's not an answer. There's a shelter across town, but it fills up fast." Elias nodded slowly. He was not sure what made him say the next words. Maybe it was the way Camilla reminded him of a niece he had not seen in years. Maybe it was the memory of the night he slept in his car, hiding from the press and the noise of failure. Or maybe it was the simple truth that something in him stirred when he saw this woman and her child, something he thought had burned out for good. "I have a guest house behind my place," he said. "It's small, furnished, empty. You can stay there. No strings, just until you figure things out." Nora blinked. "Why would you do that?" He looked at Camilla, who had just tucked her stuffed bear under her chin and was beginning to doze beside a stack of pancakes. Because no child should go to sleep hungry in the rain. It was a risk. He knew that. He did not even know their last name. But Elias had lived a life full of calculated decisions and cold business logic. And where had it gotten him? A mansion filled with silence. A legacy built on sand. Maybe it was time to listen to his gut again. Nora nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Just for a few nights." Later that evening, as the rain tapered off into a fine mist, Elias led them up the stone path behind his modest home. The guest house was a cozy cottage once used by his late aunt who had passed years ago. He unlocked the door and flicked on the lights. The warmth of yellow bulbs cast a glow over the small living space. There was a kitchenette, a sofa bed, a tiny fireplace, and a separate room with twin beds. Camilla's eyes lit up when she saw the room. She ran to the bed and bounced once before sitting cross-legged with her bear. Nora turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "This is too much," she said. "We'll pay you back." "Then pay it forward someday," Elias replied. "When you can." He lingered at the door, unsure of what else to say. "If you need anything, I'm next door." "Thank you." Nora said the words quiet but sincere. As he stepped outside, Elias glanced back through the window. Nora was helping Camilla out of her wet shoes, her hands gentle, her movements precise. The kind of care that comes from someone who has held too many burdens and still finds room for grace. Back in his own home, Elias stood at the kitchen counter pouring himself a glass of water. He looked around at the spotless surfaces, the expensive but unused appliances, the rows of cookbooks that now collected dust. For the first time in a long time, the silence in his house did not feel like a fortress. It felt like an invitation. He glanced toward the guest house lights glowing softly behind the curtains. Somewhere in the distance, Camilla laughed, and Elias Monroe, former king of kitchens and broken man in retreat, realized something strange. He was not alone anymore, and maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something new. The next morning arrived with the slow hush of early sun filtering through the curtains of the guest house. Nora stirred before Camilla did, her body waking not out of comfort, but out of habit. For the last several months her sleep had been shallow and restless, her ears tuned to any creak, cough, or unseen danger that might drift in during the night. But this morning was different. The mattress was soft beneath her back, the room warm, the silence still. Her daughter curled beside her on the twin bed, clutched her ragged stuffed bear, and slept with her mouth slightly open, one hand fisted into the blanket as if afraid to let it go. Nora sat up slowly, taking in the unfamiliar but peaceful room. The faint smell of lavender clung to the air. There was no buzzing of neon lights like in the shelters, no scent of bleach, no distant argument in the hallway. Just stillness. She rubbed her eyes and stepped quietly into the kitchenette, where a basket of groceries now sat on the counter. Eggs, milk, bread, some fruit, and a small note in carefully printed handwriting. "Thought you might need these. The eggs are from next door. Take your time. No pressure." There was no signature, but she knew who had left it. She held the note for a moment, feeling something tighten in her throat. It had been a long time since someone had done something for her without expecting anything in return. Camilla appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, rubbing her eyes' hair in tangled curls around her face. "Mommy," she whispered, "is this our house now?" Nora crouched down and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. "No, baby. It's not ours, but we're allowed to be here for a little while, just until we figure out what comes next." Camilla nodded solemnly as if understanding that safety was always a temporary condition in their lives. "Do we have to be quiet?" she asked. "No," Nora said softly. "Not today." After breakfast, which consisted of scrambled eggs and toast, eaten with surprising delight by Camilla, Nora found herself standing at the small window that overlooked the main house. Elias's home was modest compared to the mansions of the rich and famous, but it held a quiet dignity, a sense of restraint that matched the man himself. She saw him out there a short time later, walking across the small garden path with a cup of coffee in his hand, his shoulders wrapped in a thick sweater. He did not glance toward the guest house, did not hover. She appreciated that. She had known men like him before, or at least she thought she had. Men with wealth and power who used kindness as a currency to be repaid later. But Elias Monroe was difficult to read. He had not asked her any questions, had not commented on her appearance or offered unsolicited advice. He had simply said, "You can stay," and meant it. That kind of simple generosity unnerved her more than open hostility. Later that morning, she took Camilla for a walk. The sun had broken through the morning mist, and the air smelled of salt and pine. The town of Harbor Point was small, full of narrow streets and little shops with hand-painted signs. A bookstore with ivy creeping over its awning, a florist whose window was cluttered with jars of daisies and sunflowers, a bakery with pink boxes stacked in the window. Camilla tugged on her hand as they passed it. "Can we go in just to smell?" Nora hesitated. "We don't have money to buy anything, sweetheart." "Just to smell," Camilla said again, her eyes hopeful. Nora relented and they stepped inside. The scent of cinnamon and butter wrapped around them instantly. An elderly woman behind the counter smiled but did not speak. Camilla closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, a blissful smile spreading across her face. On the way back, Nora noticed a flyer taped to a lamppost. Free music class for children. Thursdays at the Harbor Community Center. Ages 6 to 10. She tore off a tab with the contact number and folded it into her coat pocket. Camilla used to love music, before everything changed. They returned to the guest house to find a package on the doorstep. Inside were a few gently used children's books, a stuffed lamb, and a clean jacket in Camilla's size. There was no note this time, but Nora felt the same uneasy gratitude bloom in her chest. That afternoon, Elias knocked once before stepping back to a respectful distance from the door. Nora opened it halfway. Camilla sat cross-legged on the floor behind her, reading one of the books aloud in a soft voice. "I have to go into town later," Elias said. "You're welcome to come, if there's anything you need." Nora hesitated. "We don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he said, "and I could use the company." His eyes flicked to Camilla. "Besides, there's a little bookstore that just got a shipment of children's books. Might be worth a stop." The bookstore was small but charming, wooden shelves stacked high with both new and second-hand titles. The owner, a soft-spoken man in his 60s, greeted Elias like an old friend, but did not ask questions about Nora and Camilla. Camilla wandered the children's section in awe, trailing her fingers along the spines as if she were in a library of treasure. Elias handed Nora a small canvas bag with a few essentials he had picked up at the market. "You don't have to keep doing this. she said, her voice low. I know. So, why are you? Elias leaned against the counter, studying the way Camilla crouched beside a low shelf, utterly absorbed in a picture book. Because she reminds me that people are still worth saving. And maybe I needed that reminder. You don't even know us. I know enough, Elias said. Back at the guest house, as Camilla napped with her new book tucked under her arm, Nora finally allowed herself to sit at the small table with a pen and an old notebook. She had not written anything in weeks, but the words came easier than expected. Not a letter, not a diary, just phrases, snatches of music, ideas for a lullaby she used to sing. Her hands trembled slightly, but it felt good to be creating again, even in private. Later that evening, there was another knock at the door. When Nora opened it, Elias held out a set of keys. For the front gate and the guest house, he said, "You're not prisoners here." "Thank you," she said, taking the keys. Their fingers brushed briefly. The contact startled her more than it should have. As he turned to go, Elias hesitated. "You were a musician?" he said, more a statement than a question. Nora froze. "How did you know?" "The way you look at sound. Like it's a language only you understand." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. There was no point in denying it. "I used to be. Piano, mostly. Some voice work." "What happened?" "The world happened," she said simply. Elias nodded and stepped off the porch. "If you ever want to play again, I have an old upright in the main house. Needs tuning, but it works." That night, after Camilla fell asleep, Nora slipped outside and walked the short path toward the main house. The moonlight silvered the garden. Crickets chirped softly in the bushes. She found the side door Elias had mentioned and stepped inside. The house was quiet, filled with warm wood and soft light. The piano sat in the corner of a room that looked like it had once been a study. Dusty but dignified. She touched the keys gently, letting the familiar feel of ivory settle under her fingers. Then she began to play. Slowly at first, the notes hesitant, but then fuller rounder. A melody emerged. Something she had composed once in college but never finished. As her hands moved over the keys, her eyes filled with tears. Not of sadness, but of relief. Of release. In the hallway, unseen, Elias stood with a cup of tea cooling in his hand, listening. He did not interrupt. He would not dare. In that moment, he understood more about Nora than any conversation could ever reveal. And for the first time since he had lost his world, Elias Monroe felt something stir inside him, something warm, something alive, hope, quiet, steady, and completely unexpected. The next morning would bring questions. The past always did, but for now the music was enough. It was still early when Elias found himself standing in the garden, warm mug in hand, staring at the sun lifting through the fog like a slow-burning ember. The sea breeze had swept through in the night, carrying with it the scent of pine and salt, and everything about the morning felt sharp and clean and somehow alive. He had not slept much. Not out of restlessness, but because the notes of Nora's music had followed him long after she left the piano bench and quietly disappeared back into the guest house. She had not known he was listening. He had stood in the hallway with the lights off, one hand on the doorframe, the other holding his tea, the melody wrapping around him like a spell he did not know he needed. It had been years since he had heard a piece of music that moved through his body like breath. And even longer since someone played in his home without cameras, without fanfare, without expectation. Down the garden path, a curtain shifted in the guest house window. A moment later, the front door opened, and Camilla stepped out barefoot and wearing a jacket clearly too big for her but zipped up to her chin. Her curls bounced as she moved, her eyes scanning the path with the solemnity of a child who had learned to check the world before entering it. Elias crouched beside a flower bed and watched as she bent to inspect a ladybug climbing a stalk of mint. She did not startle when she noticed him. She just looked at him for a long moment, then offered a small wave before going back to the ladybug. Something about the ease of that gesture, the way she accepted his presence without fear or hesitation, caught him off guard. Nora joined them a little later, wrapped in a thick sweater and holding a mug of her own. Her eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep, but she looked more present than he had ever seen her. She woke up before me, Nora said quietly, nodding to Camilla. Saw the sun through the curtains and thought it was summer. She's tough, Elias said. She's 7, Nora replied. She shouldn't have to be. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the little girl now chasing the breeze down the garden path. Then Nora turned to Elias and said, "Thank you. For the piano. I haven't played in almost 4 years. Why did you stop?" There was no room for it in survival. Elias nodded. He understood that more than most. He had stopped cooking for pleasure when the restaurants closed, when the lawsuits came, when he could no longer tell whether people tasted his food or the price tag it came with. There was a time when flavor meant more to him than fame, a time when rosemary reminded him of his grandmother's hands, and saffron meant late nights in Madrid and invention without critics. But that time felt far away. Later that morning, after breakfast was shared between them in the main kitchen, toast, scrambled eggs, and fresh tomatoes from the small greenhouse near the back, Camilla surprised them both by asking, "Can I go to the music class?" Elias raised an eyebrow. Nora looked confused. "What music class?" "The flyer," Camilla said, sliding from her stool. "You put it in your pocket." Nora blinked, then laughed softly. "You saw that?" Camilla nodded. "I want to go. I like music again now." Nora hesitated, looking to Elias as if unsure whether she had the right to ask such a thing. He leaned on the counter and said simply, "Then let's find out how to get her there." The Harbor Point Community Center was only a 15-minute walk from Elias's house, a repurposed school building with cheerful paint and a large mural of children dancing and playing music. The woman who ran the class, Miss Tilda, was a retired music teacher with gray curls and laugh lines deep enough to write poetry in. She welcomed Camilla, immediately showing her the small room with shelves full of instruments, drums, tambourines, xylophones, and an old upright piano, much like the one in Elias's study. Camilla was shy at first, clinging to Nora's side and barely whispering her name, but by the time the class began, she had slid onto a floor cushion and picked up a small wooden flute with the same reverence she had once reserved for her bear. Nora and Elias watched from the doorway side by side, neither saying a word. After the class ended, Miss Tilda pulled them aside. "She's got an ear," she said simply. "She listens before she plays. That's rare at her age. Let me know if you want her to continue. We'll find a way to make it work." Back at the guest house, Camilla chattered about the class for the first time since Elias had met her. She described the sound of the flute, the feeling of the drum under her palm, the way Miss Tilda moved her hands like a conductor. Elias caught Nora watching her daughter with an expression that was both joy and grief. He recognized it, the look of someone who was realizing just how much had been stolen from them and just how much might still be reclaimed. That night, after Camilla had gone to bed, Elias invited Nora back to the main house for tea. The kitchen was warm with the scent of herbs and lemon peel. They sat at the island, mugs in hand, the silence between them less strained than before. "You asked me yesterday why I'm helping you," Elias said after a long pause. Nora looked up, eyes wary. "You didn't answer. I guess I didn't know how to explain it. Until now." He took a breath. 3 years ago, my partner, my best friend, stole my recipes, my contracts, and my investors. He knew every weakness I had, every corner I left exposed. When it was over, I had nothing. I sold the brand, the restaurants, the television deals. I came here to disappear. Nora listened without interrupting. "But then I saw you in front of that grocery store," Elias continued, "and something clicked. Not pity, just recognition. I saw someone trying to protect what mattered, someone surviving in a world that doesn't make space for kindness. And you decided to make space," she said. "I decided I didn't want to keep pretending the world ended when my career did." Nora put her mug down carefully. "You know, I never told anyone this, but the night I was arrested, the only thing I was thinking about was getting Camilla out the back door before the police came. She was 5. She had no idea what was happening, but she held my hand and said, 'It's okay, Mommy. You always know what to do." She paused. "I didn't. I didn't even know what the charges meant. They said I embezzled funds from the school where I taught. But it wasn't me. It was the superintendent. I found the ledger. I confronted him. I think he panicked. The next week there were police in my classroom, and just like that my career was gone." "Did they drop the charges?" Elias asked. "Eventually, but not before I lost everything. My job, my home, my name. I took a deal to avoid a trial. No admission of guilt, just a quiet exit. But quiet exits still echo when you're a single mother with no resources." She stared into her tea, her voice low. "We slept in shelters, then in the car, then on the street." Elias felt his jaw tighten. He had seen injustice before, but never so close to home. "You're not going back there," he said. "We'll figure something out. A job, a plan, something." "You don't even know me," she said again. But this time her voice lacked the sharpness it had before. "I know enough. I know you protected your daughter when no one else would. I know you still do. I know you played a song last night that I haven't been able to stop hearing since." Nora looked at him for a long time. "Why do I feel like this isn't the end of something but the beginning?" "Because it is," Elias said. "Because we both needed something to begin." And as the clock ticked quietly in the background, and Camilla slept peacefully for the second night in a row, and the house exhaled the warmth of new trust, neither of them said anything else. They just sat together in that fragile but growing stillness. And for the first time in a long time, both believed the worst might be behind them, even if the past had not finished with them yet. The following week passed like a quietly blooming flower. Each day brought with it small moments that on their own might have seemed ordinary, but stitched together they formed a delicate pattern of renewal. Nora found herself waking with something she had not felt in years: purpose. She began keeping a regular routine. Morning walks with Camilla down the tree-lined sidewalks of Harbor Point. Music class at the community center on Thursdays. And in the quiet hours while Camilla played or read, Nora sat at the kitchen table in the guest house with a pencil in her hand sketching. At first it was just the piano. Then the kitchen island in Elias's home. Then a floor plan for a room designed entirely for children to express themselves. Drawing, she discovered, was like playing music. It brought stillness to the noise in her mind. Elias noticed the change not through anything Nora said, but through the little signs. The way she stood taller. The way her voice held a firmer tone when asking a question. The way she offered suggestions instead of apologies. He said nothing, but he felt it like a shift in season. Camilla had changed too. The little girl who once clung to her mother now ran freely through the backyard garden, her laughter chasing butterflies. She had taken to Elias with a surprising kind of trust. Not the kind that demanded attention, but the kind that settled naturally into routine. She would wait for him every morning by the gate and ask what the weather would be like, even though she already knew. She would ask what he was cooking, then offer to help standing on a chair and stirring slowly with focused concentration. One afternoon, while Elias was preparing a simple lunch of roasted chicken and vegetables, Camilla stood beside him in the kitchen watching every movement. "Why do you put rosemary on the carrots?" she asked. "Because it reminds me of someone I loved," Elias said without thinking. "Someone who made everything taste better." "Were they a chef too?" "Not exactly," he said with a small smile. "She was my grandmother. She raised me for a while when I was little, taught me that food isn't just about flavor, it's about memory." Camilla considered this, then picked up a sprig of rosemary and held it to her nose. "It smells like tea and trees," she said thoughtfully. Elias looked down at her and nodded. "Exactly." That evening, after Camilla had gone to bed and the dishes were washed and drying by the sink, Elias found Nora seated on the back porch of the guest house, a notebook in her lap, the pages fluttering in the breeze. She looked up when he approached. "You draw," he said. "You play music." "What else don't I know?" She closed the notebook, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I used to teach, music and art mostly. Elementary school, before everything fell apart. Have you thought about doing it again?" Nora stared into the distance. "Sometimes. But who would hire someone with a record even if the charges were dropped? You would be surprised what second chances can do when people actually care. It is hard to trust second chances, she said quietly. They always feel like a trap. Something too good that will be taken away the moment you start to believe it is real. Elias sat beside her on the porch step. The night air was cool but gentle, and the stars had begun to prick through the velvet sky above. I know the feeling, he said. When I lost the business, I thought I had lost who I was. I kept waiting for someone to show up and say I did not belong in my own story anymore. What changed? Nora asked. Nothing. Everything. I came here and nobody knew me. So I started asking myself what it would feel like to be useful without needing to be admired. That is when I realized maybe I was still the same person, just quieter, less concerned with applause. They sat in silence for a while, their shoulders close but not touching. The night crickets filled the air with rhythm, and a distant boat horn sounded from the harbor. Then Nora asked, "Do you ever miss it?" Elias glanced at her. The fame, no. The food, every day. Then why not start again? He smiled. You just said it yourself. Second chances are hard to trust. Maybe that is the point, Nora said. You are not supposed to trust them. You are supposed to test them, push against them, see if they hold. Elias laughed softly, the sound low and genuine. And what if they do not? Then at least you know. And you start over again, one dish at a time, one drawing at a time. The next morning, Elias found a sketch waiting for him on the kitchen island. It was a detailed plan for a cozy bistro space, one that could be built into the vacant storefront on Main Street where the old bakery had shut down months ago. The sketch included warm lighting community tables, a small corner stage, and hand-painted tiles with music notes etched into them. At the top of the page, written in clean, deliberate print, were the words, "What if this was our second chance?" He stood looking at it for a long time. His fingers traced the pencil lines, the sharp corners of the floor plan, the gentle curve of the bar seating that overlooked an open kitchen. Nora appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, hesitant. I wasn't sure if it was overstepping, she said. I just had the idea, and once I started drawing, I couldn't stop. This, Elias said, holding up the page, is the beginning of something real. You really think so? I know so. They spent the next few days talking about the idea. Nora would draw. Elias would talk through menu concepts. Camilla sat nearby with her crayons, often adding her own flair to the sketches. Hearts over tables, stars in the corners. Little notes like, "Don't forget cookies." It was not just a business plan. It was a possibility being born from hope. The old bakery space on Main Street had been empty for 6 months. Elias made a call to the property manager, a man named Harold, with a booming voice and an appreciation for local charm. Within 20 minutes, they had a key and a month-to-month agreement. That afternoon, the three of them stepped into the dusty spacelight, filtering through the front windows and dancing off the tiled floor. Camilla spun in a circle and declared, "This will be the stage." Elias looked at Nora and smiled. "I think she is our project manager now." They spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning, sweeping, wiping, laughing. When they left, the space already felt different, like it had remembered what it was like to be loved. But as evening settled back over Harbor Point, as the sun dipped low behind the water and the town began to glow with porch lights and window lamps, a shadow watched from across the street. A man in a silver car parked under a flickering street lamp. He did not take notes. He did not take photos. He just watched. A cigarette burned slowly between his fingers. He watched Elias lock the front door, watched Nora carry Camilla on her hip, watched them laugh, watched them walk together down the sidewalk, unaware that someone had found them at last. Inside the guest house, Nora tucked Camilla into bed and returned to the small kitchen where Elias waited with 2 mugs of tea. "We cleaned that place like we were scrubbing a memory out of it," she said. "And I think it worked. Tomorrow," Elias said, "we go get paint samples." Tomorrow, Nora agreed, but the word hung heavier than usual in the air. Outside, the wind shifted direction. The trees rustled as if something unseen had passed between them. The silver car drove away without headlights. No noise, no trace. Just the silent echo of a past beginning to catch up. And while inside the house the lights glowed warm and the plans for a second chance began to take shape, neither Elias nor Nora knew yet that the life they were building was no longer hidden. It had been seen. And what came next would test not just their resilience but their trust in each other. Even second chances, it seemed, came with shadows. By the following week, the transformation had begun in earnest. The dusty windows of the old bakery had been washed until they sparkled. The back room, once cluttered with rusted shelves and forgotten boxes, now echoed with promise. Elias had started bringing in tools, old equipment he had stored in a friend's garage, and a handful of kitchen supplies he once thought he would never touch again. Nora had painted sample colors on the far wall, soft amber and sage green, warm earth tones that felt like they belonged to a place where strangers could become family over coffee and comfort food. Camilla, ever the watchful little guardian of joy, had chosen a rich purple for the music corner where she insisted a small, upright piano would go. There was something sacred in the way it all came together. They did not rush. They moved like people who understood what it meant to rebuild from broken pieces. Each hour spent working inside that space became another stitch in the fabric they were weaving of trust, of laughter, of shared stories, and quiet understanding. Nora brought her drawings to life on the walls, painting a small mural of musical notes that flowed around a flock of birds in flight. Camilla added her own touches, tracing outlines of tiny hearts on the corners of windows, and drawing smiling suns in chalk on the back steps. Elias cooked again, really cooked for the first time in years. He experimented with new recipes in his own kitchen and brought samples to the bakery space to test the light, the scent, the feel of a dish in its intended home. Fresh biscuits with rosemary honey, tomato soup with toasted fennel, warm cinnamon apples folded into handmade pastry. Camilla became his most vocal critic and most devoted supporter, her face lighting up each time he handed her a new creation to try. Nora teased that he was spoiling her, and Elias responded with a grin and a shrug. "She deserves it," he always said. "You both do." One afternoon, as they painted a second coat on the front room wall, Nora stepped back and looked at Elias. "Do you think people will come?" she asked. "Once we open." He set his roller down and turned to her. "I think if we build something honest, they will not just come. They will stay." She nodded, but her fingers twisted the hem of her shirt. "It feels like tempting fate. Like we are getting too comfortable." "Comfort is not a crime," he said. "It is a signal. That maybe things are finally safe enough to breathe. But safety is a fragile illusion, and sometimes the past has a way of knocking when you least expect it." That evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned gold, a knock came at the door of the guest house. Elias was in his kitchen finishing a stew. Nora opened the door with Camilla perched on her hip. The man standing there was tall, with gray at his temples and a suit that looked too crisp for the relaxed town of Harbor Point. He held a leather briefcase and wore an expression that had been rehearsed too many times. "Nora Fields?" he asked. Her grip on Camilla tightened slightly. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "Who are you?" "My name is Donovan Grant," the man replied. "I am a private investigator representing certain interests from your past." Nora took a slow breath. "Be specific." "I represent Douglas Kent, the former superintendent of your previous school district." Her eyes narrowed. "I thought he retired." "He did. And yet he has reason to believe you may be in violation of certain settlement terms you signed during your case's resolution." Camilla's small arms wrapped tighter around her mother's neck. "I am not doing anything illegal," Nora said firmly. "I took a deal. I was never convicted. And yet," Donovan said, pulling a folder from his briefcase, "he is concerned about your public presence in this community, about the nature of your involvement in a new business, about how you may be representing yourself." Representing myself as what Nora demanded, as a person trying to rebuild her life. Before the man could answer, Elias appeared behind them, drawn by the raised voices. He stepped into the doorway, placing himself slightly in front of Nora and Camilla without saying a word. Donovan turned to him, eyes scanning with quick efficiency. "You must be Mr. Monroe," he said. I assume you are the financier of this project. What I am, Elias said calmly, is someone who does not appreciate intimidation tactics at his door, especially not directed at children. This is a legal matter, Donovan said, not a threat. It smells like a threat, Elias replied. And I would advise you to deliver whatever message you came with and leave. Donovan handed over the folder. We will be watching, he said, his tone measured. You should be careful about public exposure. The internet is not as forgiving as Harbor Point. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing down the sidewalk as quietly as he had come. Elias closed the door and turned to Nora. She looked pale, lips pressed into a tight line, but she held herself upright. Camilla's face was buried in her shoulder. What was that really about? Elias asked. Control, Nora said bitterly. He wants to remind me that even if the courts cleared me, he can still pull strings, still make me feel like nothing is truly mine. She set Camilla down gently and knelt to her level. It's okay, sweetheart, she said. Everything's fine. But Camilla's wide eyes said she did not believe it, and Nora's trembling hands betrayed her words. Elias crouched beside them. Listen to me, he said quietly. We knew something like this might come. We talked about what it means to start over. It means sometimes you get chased by what you left behind, but you are not alone anymore. Nora looked at him, her eyes wet with unshed tears. I thought I was done being afraid, she whispered. You do not stop being afraid, Elias said. You just learn to keep going anyway. That night, after Camilla had fallen asleep clutching her bear, Elias and Nora sat in the guest house with the folder open on the table between them. Inside were copies of documents, screenshots of her old social media posts, blurry photographs of her walking with Camilla, talking with Elias in the bakery space, even entering the community center. They are building a case to smear you again, Elias said. They want to keep you small. They want me to disappear, Nora replied. They want me to be too scared to speak, too scared to build something. Elias reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Then we will speak louder. We will build anyway. She looked at him. How you could lose everything if this gets messy. The bakery, your name. I already lost everything once, Elias said. What I am not going to do is lose the chance to build something better. With you. The next day he made a call to an old friend. Rebecca Sorensen had once been one of the best media attorneys in the country. Now, semi-retired, she lived 3 towns over and specialized in defamation cases and protecting people trying to rebuild their lives. She came to the guest house that afternoon, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, and brought her German Shepherd with her. Let me see the folder, she said. After reviewing it for 10 minutes, she sat back and nodded. They have nothing. It is smoke. Intimidation. If they had real evidence, you would have received a cease and desist letter, not a visit from a bottom-tier PI. Then what should we do? Nora asked. We make the first move, Rebecca said. We own the story before they can twist it. Go public, Elias asked. Not with everything, Rebecca said, but with enough. A story about a single mother starting over, about a community bakery meant to heal and connect. Tell it on your terms. Show people who you really are. Nora hesitated. I do not want to be a symbol. I just want to live in peace. Then let them see the real you, Rebecca said gently. Because I promise that is more powerful than anything they will dig up. By the end of the week, a local journalist had agreed to write a profile, a short human interest story for the Harbor Point Gazette. Just a few photos, a few quotes. Nothing dramatic, just the truth. They posed in front of the bakery's freshly painted sign. Camilla held a wooden spoon. Elias wore a flour-smeared apron. Nora stood in the middle, not smiling widely, but calmly, eyes steady. When the article ran, it included this line near the end. Some second chances come quietly, like a new song in a familiar place. And sometimes when you have lost everything, all you really need is a reason to believe again. Across town in a darkened office, Douglas Kent read the article and scowled. But even he could not deny what it showed. Nora Fields was no longer hiding. and Elias Monroe was not going to let her be erased. Not again. Not ever. The bakery's grand opening arrived on a soft spring morning, the kind that painted the sky with streaks of gold and promised good things before noon. A warm breeze carried the scent of salt water and fresh lavender through the streets of Harbor Point. People gathered early, drawn by curiosity, the promise of fresh pastries, and the glowing article that had appeared in the local paper just days before. The piece had traveled farther than anyone expected. First through the town, then online, where it had been quietly shared across small communities and local business groups. No one had anticipated how quickly it would spread. But it had. And now, a line formed outside the freshly restored storefront beneath the new sign painted in Nora's careful hand. It read simply, "The Violet Table." Below it in smaller script were the words, "Where stories are shared and second chances rise." Elias stood in the open kitchen, hands moving with fluid precision, the way they used to when the world still believed he was untouchable. He cracked eggs one-handed, flipped pancakes without looking, and sprinkled finishing salt as if conducting a symphony. It was not about performance anymore. It was about presence. He had not cooked for applause in years. Now he cooked because it brought people together, because it made Camilla laugh, because it made Nora smile without thinking. The bakery was alive. The walls glowed with warm color, the shelves lined with local pottery, the counter filled with trays of buttery croissants, honey oat muffins, rosemary scones, and sourdough rolls shaped into little knots of comfort. In one corner sat a used upright piano that Miss Tilda had donated after Camilla's third class. Camilla had immediately dubbed it Lulu and claimed it as her own. Nora moved through the space like someone who belonged. She wore a soft linen apron, her hair braided back a small pencil behind one ear from where she had been checking a list that morning. Her eyes swept over each detail, the placement of chairs, the arrangement of baked goods, the notes hanging from a community board where people could write things they were grateful for. No one watching her could have guessed that just months before she had slept in a car with her daughter, curled beside her, hoping the frost would not creep too far under the windows. Camilla darted past them, both carrying a small tray of cookies that she placed near the register. She had drawn the sign herself, crayon letters spelling out, "Try me, I'm magic." A group of customers smiled and nodded as they passed. Someone handed her $1, which she slipped into a jar labeled Camilla's Dream Fund. No one had told her to make that jar. She had just appeared one morning with it in her hands and said quietly, "I want to help us grow." By mid-morning, the bakery buzzed with life. Locals stopped by to drop off flowers, homemade gifts, hand-drawn cards. Strangers came in because they had seen the story online and wanted to see the place for themselves. A retired couple from 2 towns over arrived just to taste the biscuit Elias had mentioned in the article. A single mother with twins came in quietly, bought a coffee, and sat in the corner watching as Nora refilled cups and smiled softly at customers. The woman had tears in her eyes and did not speak, but when she left, she placed a note on the piano. It read, "Thank you for reminding me that hope is still possible." Later that day, Rebecca stopped by with her German shepherd and a tray of lemon bars. "This place smells like forgiveness," she joked. Elias grinned. "Forgiveness with a touch of cinnamon." "How are you feeling?" she asked more seriously. "Like something real is finally happening," Elias said. "Like maybe I have stopped running from who I was supposed to be." The sun drifted westward, and the afternoon crowd slowed, giving them space to breathe. Camilla played a soft tune on Lulu, a melody she had made up and now practiced every day. Nora leaned against the counter, watching her with a look that was equal parts awe and disbelief. "She has grown so much," she said, "since we came here. She walks differently. She speaks up more. She feels safe," Elias said. "That changes everything." But as the last group of guests finished their coffee and said goodbye, a car pulled up outside. It was not from Harbor Point. The paint was too sleek, the tires too polished, the windows too dark. Elias stepped out from behind the counter instinctively, his eyes narrowing slightly. The door opened. A man stepped out, sharp suit, polished shoes, sunglasses, and beside him another man. Not Donovan this time. Someone new, taller, broader, Both men moved like they were used to being obeyed. Nora saw them and froze. Her body stiffened before her mind caught up. Elias moved closer to her without a word. The taller man approached the counter. Nora Fields. She did not respond. My name is Carter Vale. I'm an attorney representing Douglas Kent. My associate and I need to speak with you about a pending civil matter regarding misrepresentation and defamation. Elias stepped in. This is not the place for that. You want to talk? You can go through her attorney. We sent a letter, Carter said, pulling a folder from his briefcase. We're here as a courtesy. She can choose to accept or ignore the summons, but ignoring it would be unwise. Give it to me, Nora said quietly. Her voice did not shake, though her hands did. Carter handed over the envelope. Then both men left without another word. They got into the car. The engine started, and the sleek machine disappeared down the street like it had never been there. But it had. The silence inside the bakery was sharp after they left. Camilla had stopped playing. Customers stared. Then slowly, one by one, they rose and left, giving them space. Nora stood still for a moment, staring at the envelope. Then she turned and walked toward the back room. Elias followed without asking. In the quiet of the staff area, she finally spoke. They want to bury me. They want to make sure I never open my mouth again. Elias reached for her hand. Then we will not let them. They have lawyers, she said. They have money. They have the power to rewrite history. They do not have this, Elias said. They do not have this town, this place, these people. She looked at him. What if it is not enough? Then we make it enough, Elias said. We tell the truth. All of it. You mean go public, bigger than the Gazette. We tell your story the way it was meant to be told. National, maybe farther. That would expose you too, she whispered. They will know who you are again, what you lost. Then let them, Elias said. Because I finally have something I am proud to be known for. That evening, after Camilla had gone to sleep and the bakery lights had dimmed, Elias opened his laptop and wrote an email to a contact he had not spoken to in over 3 years. A journalist, one who had once covered him as a celebrity chef and then later covered his fall with surprising fairness. Her name was Mina Caldwell. She replied within the hour. Tell me everything, she wrote. This time I want the truth. And so they began. Nora and Elias sat together, pulling out papers, timelines, notes. Nora retrieved copies of the settlement, the original accusations, the community support letters. Rebecca joined them a day later to help review every line. Elias cooked for them while they worked. Camilla painted at the table beside them, asking now and then if they were winning, and Elias always said yes. By the end of the week, Mina had what she needed. She promised to tell the story right, not polished, not pitiful, just honest. She visited Harbor Point herself, spent a day in the bakery, spoke to Camilla, watched Nora sketch new designs for a reading nook they planned to build in the back, interviewed customers who had watched the bakery become more than just a place to eat. She stayed late into the evening and asked Elias the question no one had asked in years. What do you want people to remember about you? He paused, looking toward Nora and Camilla. Then he said, that I finally learned how to build something worth staying for. The article was published 10 days later. It did not just tell the story of the Violet Table. It told the story of a woman who had been falsely accused, who had protected her child through a storm of injustice, and who had found safety in a town that believed in healing. It told the story of a man who had walked away from everything, only to find something better, waiting on a quieter path. And it ended with this line, some places serve more than food. They serve memory, courage, and hope. And if you're lucky, they might just serve your second chance on a plate still warm from the oven. The morning the article went live, it was Nora who woke first. She sat at the small kitchen table in the guest house, a mug of tea wrapped in her hands, while the early light filtered through the curtains in long golden strips. Camilla was still asleep, curled in a bundle of blankets that had become her fortress of comfort. Outside, the garden was quiet except for the occasional chirp of a bird brushing past the budding flowers Elias and Camilla had planted just the week before. Nora had not opened her laptop yet. The truth was, she was afraid. The story was out now. The whole story. Her story. No longer reduced to whispers or half-truths or legal settlements. And while she knew they had done the right thing, there was a weight in her chest that pressed against every breath. Because even the truth, when spoken loudly, could hurt. Elias knocked once on the side door, then opened it gently. He carried a bag from the corner bakery, though it was his own shop that now fed half the town. Still no courage to click, he asked softly. Nora gave him a faint smile. Not yet. I guess I'm not ready to see my face next to my past. Your face is not next to your past, Elias said. It is next to your strength. That is what people will see. He set the bag on the table, pulled out a cinnamon bun, and broke off a piece. Camilla's favorite, he said. She called dibs last night. Nora took a deep breath and finally opened her laptop. The article had already been shared hundreds of times. The headline was bold but respectful. She was wrongfully accused and silenced. Now, this mother is baking hope back into the world. The photos were natural. One of Nora laughing beside Camilla in the bakery. One of Elias behind the counter with flour on his hands. One of the piano with a sign written by Camilla that said, "Play with love." Nora scrolled slowly through the story. Mina had told it gently, truthfully. She had not made her out to be a victim, but a survivor, a mother, a teacher, a builder. By the time Nora reached the end, her hands were shaking. She did not cry. She had cried too much in the past to waste tears now. But there was a deep ache that settled inside her, the ache of being seen. Camilla padded into the room a few minutes later, her eyes still half closed, and climbed into her mother's lap. "Did the world read about us?" she asked sleepily. "Yes," Nora whispered. "They did. And did they like us? I think they're starting to." At the bakery there was already a small crowd forming before the sign had even flipped to open. People with coffees in hand, holding their phones, talking in quiet excitement. Elias stood at the window and watched them. Nora stood beside him, hands tucked into the pockets of her apron. "We need to be ready," he said. "Today might be different," I know Nora said. "But we're different now, too." The day unfolded in waves. First the locals, people who had been there since the beginning, who brought flowers and hugs and soft words of solidarity. Then strangers, from neighboring towns, from across the county. A woman from 3 states over had driven through the night after reading the article, saying only that she had once been in Nora's shoes and needed to see what healing looked like. Camilla sat at the piano and played simple melodies throughout the afternoon. No one asked her to. She simply played because the room needed it. Children sat cross-legged on the floor. Elderly couples held hands at corner tables. Rebecca dropped by, laughing at the crowd, joking that they might need to open a second location. Even Miss Tilda came with her arms full of sheet music and 2 jars of strawberry jam. But not everyone came with kindness. Late in the afternoon, as the bakery buzzed with conversation and laughter, a woman stepped inside wearing a blazer and heels that clicked sharply against the tile. She held her phone in front of her as if filming, her lips pressed into a thin line. She did not order anything. She did not smile. She walked slowly through the room, capturing footage, and then turned to Nora, who stood by the coffee station restocking mugs. "You're Nora Fields?" the woman asked loudly. Nora looked up, confused. "Yes, I read about you. Just wanted to see for myself if it was all real. You know, some of us actually follow the rules. Some of us don't get second chances." The room fell silent. Elias moved toward them immediately. Nora stayed where she was. Her voice was calm. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Just wanted to see the famous bakery built on sympathy," the woman sneered. "Built by someone who lied her way out of accountability." "Ma'am," Elias said evenly. "You are welcome here if you are respectful. If not, I will have to ask you to leave." "It's funny," the woman continued now, addressing the room. "How quickly people forget the truth when the story is packaged with fresh bread and piano music." Rebecca appeared then, standing from a corner booth, her arms folded. "The truth was buried for years," she said clearly. "Now it's finally in the light." And unless you are here to buy a muffin or apologize, I suggest you find another place to spread your bitterness." The woman flushed. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The silence held for a beat. Then someone began to clap. Slowly. Then louder. The sound spread through the room until the walls echoed with it. Not a standing ovation, but a reminder that Nora Fields was not alone. Later, as they cleaned up for the day, Elias found Nora wiping the same countertop for the 4th time. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said, though her voice was tight. "It's just hard, you know, the weight of being known. I got used to being invisible." "Then maybe this is the time to stop hiding," Elias said gently. "You cannot control what they say, but you can choose how to respond." "It still hurts," Nora admitted, "even when I know they're wrong." "Truth doesn't erase pain," Elias said. "It just gives it a place to belong." That night, after the bakery was dark and Camilla had fallen asleep, Nora stood outside in the garden. Elias joined her a moment later. The stars were bright overhead, the moon low and full. "You know what I remember most about that first night we met?" Elias asked. "You stood between your daughter and the world like nothing could touch her. Even though you were freezing and tired and scared, I remember thinking this woman could rebuild a whole city with nothing but willpower." Nora smiled softly. "And now I think you already have." She looked at him. "And you? What have you rebuilt?" "The version of myself that believes in something besides disappointment. That's a start," Nora said. "It's more than that," Elias said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I want to show you something." He handed it to her. It was a blueprint, a new design, a second level above the bakery, a space for community classes, music, art therapy, a dream with walls. "This is where we go next," he said. "If you are ready." "Together," Nora asked. "Only together," Elias said. And for the first time since her world had fallen apart, Nora did not flinch at the idea of a future. She opened the blueprint and began to imagine what the walls would look like, what laughter would sound like in that space. Above them, the stars blinked quietly and the garden swayed in the breeze. And in the stillness of that night, surrounded by the life they had planted, they stood side by side with nothing to hide from anymore. Only forward, only light, only the promise of what they were building next. The summer sun broke gently over Harbor Point, casting long beams of amber light through the window panes of the violet table. The bakery, once quiet and uncertain, now thrummed with daily rhythm. Customers came not just for the rosemary scones or the honey-baked rolls, but for something deeper that had grown between the walls, something soft and real and enduring. It was a place where names were remembered, where music filled the corners, and where people whispered that maybe hope had a scent and warmth and could be served with tea in mismatched mugs. It had been 3 weeks since the article went live. 3 weeks of strangers arriving to say thank you. Of Nora receiving envelopes with no return addresses containing notes scrawled in careful handwriting from people who had been silenced too. Some wrote that they had been fired for telling the truth. Others said they had lived years under shame they never earned. A few simply wrote, "Thank you and nothing more." One morning, Elias came into the bakery to find Camilla already sitting at the piano, playing something light and playful with one hand while eating a cinnamon muffin with the other. He grinned and leaned on the counter, watching her. "You practicing or performing?" he asked. She shrugged. "Both. Miss Tilda says every note tells a story." "Then that one sounds like a butterfly chasing a donut," he said. Camilla giggled and kept playing. Nora stepped out of the back room carrying a box of hand-labeled spice jars. Her hair was tied back with a scarf that had tiny paint stains from earlier that morning. She caught Elias's eye and tilted her head toward the community board on the wall. "We got a letter from the mayor's office," she said. "They want to recognize the Violet Table as a cornerstone business for the region." "That sounds fancy," Elias replied. "Do we get a plaque?" "I think we get a certificate," Nora said. Camilla already offered to frame it with glitter. "Naturally." They laughed. Not the nervous laughter of people surviving, but the easy laughter of people who had built something solid. Rebecca arrived not long after with her usual notebook and a basket of peaches from a neighbor's orchard. "I have some news," she said, sliding onto a stool. "Douglas Kent has officially resigned from his board positions. The investigation into his conduct during your case is moving forward." Nora's hands paused over a jar. He resigned. He knew the investigation would become public soon. Better to walk away before the headlines hit. Nora said nothing for a long moment. Then she placed the jar on the shelf and exhaled. "I did not think I would care," she admitted. "But I do. Not out of revenge. Just because it means maybe he will not do this to anyone else." "He will not," Rebecca said. "Not again." That evening the bakery closed early. Elias had planned a small gathering in the back garden, just a few close friends, a quiet celebration of what they had survived. Camilla helped string paper lanterns along the trees while Nora set out pitchers of lemonade and trays of finger sandwiches. Rebecca arrived with her dog and a homemade cherry pie. Miss Tilda came with a ukulele and sat in the corner plucking soft tunes as the evening air cooled. Nora stood at the edge of the garden looking out at the scene, her daughter laughing with Tyler Elias's young godson who had come to visit. Rebecca in deep conversation with a local council member, Camilla chasing fireflies with a mason jar. It felt surreal, not perfect, but peaceful, like breathing after holding your breath for far too long. Elias walked up beside her, a folded piece of paper in his hand. "I was waiting to give you this," he said. Nora took the paper and opened it. Inside was an official business license. It was for a second location, a space near the community center that would serve as an extension of the Violet Table, a non-profit hub for art, music, and mentorship. Its name was listed clearly at the top, the Violet House. Beneath it, the listed co-founders were Elias Monroe and Nora Fields. Nora blinked hard. "You already filed it. I wanted it to be real," Elias said. "In writing. A place where we grow not just food, but futures." Camilla ran up to them with her jar now glowing with tiny golden lights. "Mommy," she said breathlessly, "Tyler says fireflies are just stars that come down to visit when they miss the earth." Nora crouched and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Then catch one for each of our tomorrows," she whispered. Camilla nodded seriously and ran back to the garden. As the evening deepened, people shared stories around the table. Miss Tilda played a melody that made even the adults hum along. Nora found herself sitting with Elias on the garden bench, watching the sky shift from pink to indigo. "Do you still think about the beginning?" she asked. "The night in the rain," Elias nodded. "Every time I hear the wind hit the windows, it reminds me that some storms lead you home." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was not looking for a home. I was just looking for a place to stop running." And now he asked. "Now I think I want to stay," she whispered. The next morning, Camilla brought her bear and a crayon drawing to the table. It showed a house with a piano and a bakery, and a sun that looked suspiciously like a cinnamon bun. Underneath it in shaky letters she had written 3 names. Hers, her mother's, and Elias's. "I made it for our wall," she said. "Our family wall." Elias looked at Nora. Nora looked at Camilla, and without needing to speak, something passed between them. Something rooted. Something that could not be shaken by lies or lawsuits, or even the shadows of the past. Later that week, when a journalist from a national magazine called asking for an interview, Nora hesitated. She paced the kitchen while Elias stirred soup. "Do we keep telling the story?" she asked. "Or do we let it rest?" Now Elias tasted the soup and set down the spoon. "We do not owe the world our pain," he said. "But if the story helps someone else out of theirs, maybe it is worth sharing one more time." "Then I want to tell it in my words," Nora said. "Not as a scandal, but as a journey, a bridge between broken and brave." Camilla's laughter echoed from the bakery front. Elias reached for Nora's hand and held it. "Tell it however you want," he said. "I'll be right here. Every word, every step." And when the story appeared weeks later, it did not focus on what had been lost, but on what had been found. A mother's strength, a daughter's joy, a man's rediscovered purpose. A town that remembered how to hold each other up. The final line of the piece read simply, "When a place serves healing as its main dish, everyone leaves full." The violet table had started as a shelter from the storm, but it became a lighthouse, a symbol, a promise. That even when the world tried to take everything from you, there were still mornings filled with music, still nights with stars and second chances, and a table always waiting for the next person who needed to believe again. Thank you for walking this journey with us. Sometimes second chances come, not with grand gestures, but with a warm meal, a soft piano note, or a hand that simply refuses to let go. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. We read every word. And if you believe in redemption, quiet courage, and the kind of love that rebuilds from the ruins, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this one. Click the video on your screen now for another story that will stay with you long after the last word. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next story. Let me know if you'd like a shorter version or one with a stronger focus on community or family.